the book test, sort of, in a hybrid form of touch-based FC.
Why is it that most of the time, most of the autistic individuals are not looking at the keyboard?
Welcome to another critique of facilitated communication. I've put timestamps in the description box for those of you who'd like to skip around. FC is known by many different names, including, but not limited to, observations of a former facilitator. What follows are my observations as a former facilitator, who participated in reliably controlled authorship testing in 1993. To determine authorship in FC-generated messages that contained allegations of abuse against my student's family, the testing showed that I, not my student, authored the FC-generated messages, even though I, like all practicing facilitators, believed I was simply providing physical and emotional support to my student so she could communicate her thoughts independently. I was devastated by the results. But these results have been replicated dozens of times, with hundreds of facilitators and thousands of trials. Links to controlled studies and systematic reviews are in the description box below. Information workshop leaders didn't tell us. After the testing, I learned some key information about FC that I had not been given access to in the FC workshop I took. FC was not then and is not now an evidence-based technique. Anecdotes and testimonials, aka feel-good miracle stories, are not evidence, though facilitators may sincerely believe in the technique. Reliably controlled tests consistently show that the FC-generated responses are only correct when the facilitators have access to the test stimuli. If the communications are independent, why does the facilitator have to know the answers for it to quote-unquote work? When facilitators are blinded from the test stimuli, the FC-generated responses are either incorrect, the clients can't spell, unintelligible, the clients don't have letter-sound recognition, or correctly spelled with words that have nothing to do with the questions being asked. In other words, facilitator guesses. Most facilitators are unaware of the extent to which they use physical, visual, and/or auditory cues to influence and control letter selection. Well-intentioned people can be fooled by FC. I stopped using FC after the testing, but have continued studying it over the past 30+ years as a skeptic with a particular interest in facilitator behaviors. Proving telepathic abilities in individuals being subjected to FC. A percentage of facilitators have always believed that FC works through telepathy. For some reason, it's easier for facilitators to believe in the magical superpowers of non-speaking individuals with autism than it is for them to believe that they, the literate adults, are controlling letter selection through physical, auditory, and visual cues. To prove telepathic abilities in individuals being subjected to FC, S2C, and RPM, researchers would first need to establish that the FC-generated messages attributed to the individual with autism reflect their own thoughts and not those of the facilitator. The non-speaking individual with autism has the language and literacy skills to comprehend the words being spelled on his or her behalf. These skills, by the way, need to be taught and are not innate or learned through osmosis. The individual can interact with the keyboard or letterboard independently to spell out words or numbers that the facilitator has not seen before or during the testing situation. The non-speaking autistic individual receives the telepathic information and types it independently without external cues provided by the facilitator. These cues include, but are not limited to, vocalizations, body movements, hand gestures, and/or physical touch. The exact same cues that need to be ruled out to establish authorship in FC, but today's facilitators refuse to participate in this type of test. We can, however, study facilitator behavior by analyzing pro-FC YouTube videos, movies, and other media. A telepathy test. In the following clip from the Telepathy Tapes, the facilitator is shown a picture of a pirate in a book. And then she holds a letterboard in the air so that her daughter can allegedly read her thoughts and spell out the word pirate. Even though the video was behind a paywall, supposedly to protect the identities of the participants faces and names are publicly displayed on the Telepathy Tapes website, so in this video I am showing the FC session without masking their faces. The book test. This telepathy test appears to be modeled after a mentalist trick called the book test. If done well, the mentalist is able to trick his subject into believing that the forced choices she made to select a random word or picture on a random page from a random book were made freely and without influence from the mentalist. To the subject, it feels like the mentalist has read her mind, but the mentalist planned everything in advance and knew what word she was going to pick. That's the beauty of the trick. Google book test solution to see how the trick is done. Facilitator control over letter selection. I don't believe the facilitator in this case was performing the mentalist trick, even though there are some similarities. For example, the mother picked a random picture on a random page in a random book. But none of that matters because she, the facilitator, saw the answer, a picture of a pirate, and knew how to spell pirate in Spanish. She was then asked by the podcast host to facilitate the answer with her daughter. If this was a reliably controlled authorship test for FC, the facilitator would not have been given access to the test stimuli, the picture of the pirate. Facilitating the word pirate. Let's look at the clip from the Telepathy Tapes first without annotation, and then I will point out facilitator behaviors that I believe raise questions about authorship.
U, I, R, A, T, A.
Mind-blowing example of telepathy. According to Kai Dickens, the Telepathy Tapes host, at this point everyone in the room had had their mind blown, because to them the girl had telepathically read her mother's mind and typed out the word pirate in Spanish, P-I-R-A-T-A. Facilitator behaviors. However, by examining the facilitator's behaviors, we find there may be a more down-to-earth reason why the girl was able to type out a word that she had not seen, but that her mother had. Letterboard drift. By holding a letterboard in the air, facilitators increase the chance that they will move the board to aid in letter selection. Often facilitators are unaware of the extent to which they move the board up and down, side to side, or backwards and forwards, which cues their clients as to which letters to select. Here's the same clip from earlier, but with annotation to show the letterboard moving in the air.
U, I, R, A, T, A.
If the girl can point to letters independently, then why does the facilitator have to hold the board in the air? Why can't the girl point to the letterboard when it is on a stable surface? Physical touch. Facilitator touch at the wrist, elbow, shoulder, or other body part has long been associated with the ideomotor response. Or small, non-conscious muscle movements that aid in letter selection. Again, facilitators are often unaware of the full extent to which even subtle changes in pressure can and does influence letter selection. I've used the same clip as before, but this time I've zoomed the video in to show how the facilitator holds onto her daughter's face and chin. I've also applied a mask to block out part of the background. The facilitator appears to be using her thumb to get her daughter to move her head in the direction she wants her daughter to look on the letterboard, and uses her fingertips to indicate where on the letterboard she'd like her daughter to touch. Watch how the facilitator's fingers flex as she calls out the letters.
U, I, R, A, T, A.
Testing FC under reliably controlled conditions. Despite the facilitator's belief that she's not controlling letter selections and that the results of the pirate test was due to a mind-to-mind connection with her daughter, her behaviors, holding the letterboard in the air, touching the daughter's face, and flexing her fingers, raise questions as to who is actually controlling letter selection. What would happen to the girl's ability to spell correctly if the facilitator was prevented from seeing the target word, number, or picture? The letterboard was placed on a stable surface. The facilitator was prevented from seeing the letterboard during letter selection. The facilitator was prevented from touching the girl during letter selection. The facilitator was out of visual and auditory range during letter selection. The girl was shown one word or picture to spell, and her facilitator was shown a different word or picture. A complete speech and language evaluation was done in Spanish and English without the presence of the facilitator to determine the extent to which the girl could independently understand and use spoken and written language in the two languages she's purported to know. Summary. In today's video, we looked at a clip from the Telepathy Tapes, a podcast claiming that non-speaking individuals with autism have telepathic abilities. But we see that the facilitator in this case is using a hybrid form of FC that includes holding the letterboard in the air and holding on to the girl's face. Even though the mother is sincere about her beliefs, these cues raise questions about authorship. In addition, the testing was not reliably controlled, as the mother was shown the target picture and then asked to assist the daughter in spelling out the answer. This may have fooled the Telepathy Tapes crew, but to me it appears that the FC-generated messages were not the result of telepathic abilities, but likely facilitator-authored instead. The science. To date, there is no scientifically rigorous evidence to prove facilitated communication, spelling to communicate, rapid prompting method, or any of their variants produce independent communication. Controlled studies show that facilitators, not their clients, are producing the typed messages. Many organizations oppose the use of facilitator-reliant techniques. These include, but are not limited to, American Speech-Language Hearing Association, American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, American Psychological Association, Association for Behavior Analysis, Association for Science and Autism Treatment. These organizations cite the following reasons. They encourage their members not to use facilitator-reliant techniques: lack of scientific evidence, prompt dependency, facilitator cuing and control over letter selection, potential harms including false allegations of abuse, lost opportunity costs as the individuals are prevented access to evidence-based forms of augmentative and alternative communication. This educational video is intended to draw attention to the problem of facilitator cuing and control in a technique called facilitated communication. Criticisms of FC, S2C, and RPM or any of their variants contained in this video are not directed at the individuals being subjected to its use. For more information about FC, please visit facilitatedcommunication.org. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment to help grow this project. Thank you for watching until the very end, and remember, FC is not science.